1, 2.
Okay. So yeah, hi, I'm Jennie Potts. As Andy said, graduated in 2010, and today, well, I've titled this talk "Believe in Brave." And bravery is something that we talk a lot about at B&B Studio, but I think it's also, that's sort of in the terms of working for brave brands and doing brave design, but I think it's also really important for you guys to think about in terms of, you know, what you're doing next, what you're doing for your career. And I'll talk a little bit about how sort of some of my personal bravery has led to where I've got to today. So the power of being brave for brands, for our future and for yours. So this is the beginning. I used to have red hair and terrible sunglasses on. I think Rachel's in there somewhere as well. Right in the middle. That's the guild. I think that was after final handing. Pete's in there as well. That's what the Adelphi used to look like when there was an actual proper roundabout there. But yeah, I started in Preston also. And I think for me, like, one of the most important things that Preston taught me was the power of ideas. Alan Fletcher famously said, "I've nothing against Preston, but shouldn't the best course in the country be in its capital city?" And I don't think that's true, because I think it's really important that, you know, the good teaching is happening around the country because you get a much more diverse pool of talent. So Preston taught me all about the power of an idea, and that's something that myself and all of my friends who graduated at the same time have taken into all of our careers. I think the same thinking that I was taught in Preston on those 1 week projects are things that I've been taken through. And it's the same way that I think throughout the rest of my career. So here's a couple of projects. And actually I was going back through my final year portfolio, which when looking back on it, I was like, God, this is pretty shit. I don't know how I got a job. But looking through it, and I was like, you know, style dates very quickly. And I think, you know, going back 15 years ago, the portfolio didn't look very good. Nothing was worked up very well. The machines weren't as good as they are now. There was no AI. There was no, you know, nice visual libraries and things that you could steal. But there was still power in the idea. And I think these two projects were two things actually that were both the 1 week projects from first year, and they were both actually, now looking back on my final year portfolio, probably the two best things in there. Purely because all the like style that looks shit is taken away, and it goes back to the sole idea. So after my second year, I went down to London. There's another terrible picture. There's me at the front. The guy next to me is my now husband. We worked together at that time. There's Andy in the back. This is a little pub in London. Some things never change. We're just in the pub now. And yeah, for me, that was my first sort of brave decision, I guess. Moving to London really frightened me at the time. I am obviously not from down south. I'm from the Wirral, and I was like, everyone up here was saying to me, "Oh, you don't want to go to London, it's busy and it's smoky and it's expensive, you know, why would you want to go there?" But there are a lot of opportunities in London, and that's not to say that there's not opportunities up here and elsewhere, but for me, like, there was so many more agencies in London, so much more opportunity, and even though it scared me, I was like, well, it's placement year, I can go for 6 months, and if I hate it, I can come home and never go back. But I went and I did placements at these agencies, some of which no longer exist. So the Partners then became Superunion and is now Design Bridge and Partners. I think all the rest are still around. But yeah, I went to these different places, and actually the first 3 months I didn't love it. I was at Ziggurat, nothing against Ziggurat brands, but I had 3 months there. It was my first placement, and I just wasn't vibing with London. I was like, I think I was a bit in shock, to be honest, like, what am I doing here? And yeah, it's a funny thing, because you're down there, you're like, I was living in a shitty flat, I was on my first placement. I think you don't really know what to do when you're on your first placement, so you're just sort of there, like, oh, can I help you with anything? I don't think at the time the agency was going through a particularly good time, so there was lots of like huddled chats going on, and I was like, oh, I don't know, why is everyone whispering, and is it about me? Of course it was nothing to do with me. I think they had bigger business issues going on at the time. But what I think is really interesting is, you know, I stayed with it, stuck with it, and then in the January I went to the partners and loved it. Like, just the way they worked, and it was hard, like don't get me wrong, it was hard work. I was working on Jack Renwick's team, but what was so exciting about that is she loves ideas, and she was like, if you've got an idea, just put it on the wall. And I was like, okay, so I sort of put one at the bottom of the wall, and she was like, that's actually really good. And there was just a nice atmosphere. Everyone was in, everyone was working hard, but there was all this sort of collective excitement over the briefs. Everyone was going to pub together. And I suppose part of why I probably didn't enjoy Ziggurat Brands is because I wasn't embracing it at the time. I think I was there, I was nervous, I wasn't really going to the pub with everybody even though I was invited. I just sort of went home, and I think, you know, I came back in the January and I embraced the partners as a new fresh place. And then from then on, I think I started to get it and started to understand why I was there, what I was doing. And for me, I think that's the thing, you have to say yes to things, and that takes bravery, you know, first and foremost, because a lot of the time you're like, I don't want to go to the pub, I don't know these people, but you do that and you actually end up having a really good night, and then you make friends and you bond. And how it works a lot of the time when you're in London is it's the people that you meet, and if you get on with them well and you do a good job, they then say, oh, get in touch with my mate, they work at this agency, I'll give you their details, and so on and so on. And I think I went down to London with just the first 2 placements, and then all the rest sort of came from that, people just saying, oh, get in touch with these people. Anyway, out of all those places, the one I enjoyed the most was Tanner Duckworth. I learned lots of different things from different places, but I just really vibed with that agency. I was so excited with the work they were doing. I got on really well with the team. Not that I didn't everywhere else, but it just really clicked there. And so then I made it my mission when I came back to uni to try and get a job there. Unfortunately, I did when I graduated a year later. So I was there for 6 years. This is some of the work that I did when I was there. So actually quite a lot of booze on there, some pet food. But yeah, I learned a lot working there, and I'm still really good friends with a lot of the people that I worked with. And I think that's the thing about London. You find your tribe. London's such a big place, but it actually ends up feeling very small because you hang out with all the people that you relate with and that you know. So actually most of my friends in London are all other Northerners, and we all kind of met at work and hang out together. So yeah, I did some really nice projects while I was at Tanner Duckworth, and actually it changed a lot as a business during those 6 years. One of my first projects down here was Waitrose Pet Food, which again, applying that sort of Preston way of thinking. It's not always necessarily about those sort of really obvious ideas, but that was a big part of the brief, was how can you do the range navigation, so how can you colour code the different needs of dog food. So I came up with this idea of like dogs like to put things in their mouths, so colour coded by different shoes, which was really fun, and I got to do a photo shoot, and that was like one of my first jobs in the industry. And no one in the studio wanted to work on it, so I was like, I'm not fucking doing another pet food brand. But yeah, I did that, and then everyone was like, oh, that's actually quite good, and they were a bit jealous of it. So yeah, just to embrace all those sort of briefs that other people don't necessarily want to work on and see the opportunity. And then again, another sort of Preston, where I think this is a whiskey, the Scapa one at the bottom, from the Isle of Orkney. So it was like really sort of redesigning it to own where it's from, and the distillery's right on basically that viewpoint. So hiding a little Orcadian boat in the A. So you can see how that sort of Preston thinking comes through. Anyway, worked there for 6 years and learned a lot, had a great time. But the business had changed quite a lot, as I said, during that time, and they'd actually sold, I think they sold in 2015 to Publicis, which changed the company a little bit, and we were doing a lot more big brands, which I think, you know, bring the money in, and there was great opportunities within those projects, but I wanted the sort of fast turnover of smaller projects, and then that is why I joined B&B Studio, where I've been since. So I've been at B&B for 7 years. B&B was founded by Sean Bowen and Kerry Bolt, hence the B and B, and they were both ex-Pearl Fisher. They met there and then founded their own agency after working together for a long time there and taking a lot of their learnings. And I think they were very excited about the opportunity to work with challenger brands. So they'd worked with some challenger brands at Pearl Fisher, but mostly, again, those sort of bigger brands. So when I joined, they'd already been working with quite a few challenger brands, and that's what really excited me, because I was like, instead of working with those global, you know, Coke, Burger King, actually being able to work with the people that are coming into the industry who are creating brands from scratch, and being able to create a brand from scratch from a design point of view, I thought was really exciting. I think it's one thing taking a brand that everybody knows and exists and sort of redesigning it, which we do a lot of at B&B as well, but actually creating a brand from scratch I thought was really exciting. So our ethos at B&B is a braver today is a brighter tomorrow. So we always try to apply that sort of brave way of thinking to the work that we do. So we try to do work that isn't sort of following trends or isn't following what everybody else is doing, but making, you know, your own path for the brand that you're working on. But obviously doing it in the right way. So it's not just doing things for the sake, doing difference for the sake of being different. We work a lot with challenger brands, innovators and idealists, and we like to pair with brands that believe in a brighter future, essentially. So a lot of brands that are doing good for the world, whether that's a better product or more sustainable or more ethical. So we work a lot with challenge brands, disruptive brands, innovative, oh, I can't say that word, it's written down, and ethical brands. We do a lot of brand creation and naming, again, which is one of the things that really excited me about B&B. So this is a bit of a snapshot, and I think it's really hard when I'm doing talks about the work that we do at B&B to sort of whittle down the project, because I think, you know, the strength of some of the bigger agencies is they have these like 5 key case studies of these massive brands that they've worked on, but for us it's much more about like the variety. We work on a lot of different brands on different products, mostly around food and drink, and I think one of our strengths is naming as well. So all of the brands on this page we've named from, oh sorry, not this brand creation. We named Bear, Herb Tender, Citizen Smith, Spritz, Kabuto, Kit and Kin, and I think, you know, for me it's really exciting to work somewhere where we can take the principle of what a brand's about and the exciting things that they want to do, and then decide what we should call it and then design around that. And we also do what we call meaningful rebrands. So we're not just redesigning a brand just for the sake of making it look more pretty or better. I mean, that is part of it, but also, you know, to hopefully give it success for the future. Some of these are much more drastic redesigns. Obviously there's not the before and after, so you can't really see that, but some of them are like almost brand creations, and then some of them are much more sort of iterative, taking them on for the future. So our process, very much like how you guys all work at uni. I think that's very consistent across the agency world. You come up with a strategy, so you get the brief and you distill it down, and then you come up with a sort of brand positioning. We call them creative essences, so the strategy team come up with a creative essence that then becomes our brief to work to. We always start with a sketch, and that's not true of every agency, but I'll get into a bit more detail why I think that's so important, but sketching ideas versus going straight on the computer and trying to make stuff look great. Scrutinise is all about internal crit, so you'll do that at uni, you know, you'll come up with ideas and you'll speak to the tutors, or you'll come and have a crit, and then you'll go back and come up with more ideas. So we have a lot of internal crits, but then also when you present to a client, you present the work to a client, they critique it, so it's a lot of back and forward. So the scrutinise and sharpen sort of happens on repeat, and hopefully eventually you get something really great. So I'm just going to show like a few different projects. I'll try and whiz through these. So the first one is War Halo. I brought some for the raffle, so hopefully you guys have seen some of them. But this is what the brand looked like previously. So they were only selling in like health food shops like Holland & Barrett, because it's raw chocolate, it's vegan, it's healthier, but still tastes great. So they were very much a sort of like little niche brand, and they wanted to go much more mainstream. They wanted to be able to get into the, Sainsbury's, Tesco's, and have a bit more of a broader appeal. So this, again, start with a sketch. So always start with a sketch to try and get down the idea. And the reason we think it's so important at B&B is I think the purity of sketching an idea takes away the element of trying to follow trends, trying to make it look slick, trying to, copy things on Pinterest, and you go right back to just what is the idea, back to the Preston way of teaching, what is the idea. They wanted to keep the name of the client, which we were really happy about because we thought Raw Halo was actually a really good name, but the problem is before they were obviously in this niche territory, and they weren't really being very proud about who they were and all the amazing things they did as a business. They're like super ethical and have a great product. So a lot of our ideas were trying to find ways which we could make the pack work better on shelf, so give them more standout when they're in that mainstream space. But then also, what is the idea? So how can we take their name? Halo's a bit of a gift, it gives you something to draw. But how can we do that in a way that feels a little bit cleverer or more unexpected? So we were looking at things like, circles as an abstracted way, or wrapping the logo up in the halo, whether we can turn the O into the halo. And then the one on the bottom right, it's a terrible sketch, but that's what we ended up doing. And I think also it was about finding inspiration outside of the obvious. So this at the time was the luxury mainstream category. I think it still probably looks quite similar now. There's raw chocolate in there, which were their kind of key competitors for the more mainstream area. But there was also the sort of ones outside of raw that they would be competing against from a sort of price point of view. But you can see everyone kind of starts to merge together a little bit from a design point of view. And the big reason for this is because these codes equal things. So dark colours, gold, certain textures and patterns equal raw or equal indulgent, which is great because they get consumer very quickly to what you're trying to sell. But the problem is if you're trying to stand out as a challenger brand with a product that is better, and you need to do that instantly on shelf, you need to stand out from the crowd. So this is our final design for Raw Halo. So you can see from the sketch to this, it didn't really change, obviously made look a lot nicer from my terrible sketch. But we used the space that we created with the typography to create a negative space halo, which then gives us a really distinctive bold pack, but also an area to put in the details that you obviously need to put in there. And then one of the other ideas, which was a halo with a little cacao bean in the centre, was then used as a little stamp for their ethically grown organic cacao in the corner. And then that icon of the little cacao halo was then used on the back, so sort of echoing where that negative space halo was on the front, we used that foil on the back. And another nice thing that Raw Halo did was, versus where they were, was they moved away from the box packaging, which then had a plastic sleeve inside, to just these paper wraps, which made them obviously much more sustainable, and they became a completely plastic-free business. Also within the strategy of sort of glowing with goodness, we came up with these ways of breaking down the brand and all the great things that they did into mind, body and spirit. So really adopting codes from the wellness world rather than the luxury chocolate world to stand out for what they stand for. That is the range, lots of nice, glowy, vibrant colours. And then because it was a paper wrap, it meant that we could use it inside to tell a bit more of their stories, so the fact that they're ethically sourced, ethically made and ethically minded. And then we sort of ran with the aesthetics then of that wellness world versus the dark tones of the luxury chocolate world, which again links to the fact that this is a healthier product, but also differentiates them from everything that was out there at the time. And they've recently released these. I did bring some, but had a bit of a disaster. My water bottle exploded in my bag last night, so I've got like a load of soggy bars of raw hay. So I had to go buy some more this morning, which I put into the raffle. So I did have some of these. but they don't look so great now, so sorry about that. The next one I'm going to talk about is Isle of Wight tomatoes. So this is a fresh tomato growing company based obviously on the Isle of Wight. And this is what they looked like previously. So they were all a little bit sort of hokey, oh, you know, we're a fresh farm brand, which it's not wrong from a design point of view, but there's nothing there that's differentiating them from the rest, you know, the rest of everything else that's necessarily out there or on the shelf. And it's also not telling you a lot about why they're so great. These tomatoes were, you could buy them fresh, but they were also supplying Michelin star restaurants across London, and they were selling out on Borough Market every week because the quality of the tomatoes is so good. And what's really interesting about Isle of Wight tomatoes is that they are from the Isle of Wight. So for us, it was all about taking the brief and simplifying clarity, and I think that's a really important thing to remember. A little sort of tip from me to you guys is, and the way I think it was Mike Rigby who said this in a talk when I was at Preston. He's like, put a brief into 2 words, and that's what you're trying to capture. And I still do this today. So for Isle of Wight, the difference about the Isle of Wight is that it has the most sunshine hours of anywhere else in the UK, which is why it's such a good place to grow tomatoes. But it wasn't something that they were talking about. They weren't even called the Isle of Wight tomatoes, they were called the tomato store, which again wasn't celebrating their difference, wasn't celebrating their provenance. So for us it was like, simplify the brief, sunshine and tomatoes. It's a bit windy out there. So we used the colour yellow instead of the colour red. And the red does appear throughout the brand, but red is the most obvious colour obviously to use for a tomato brand, but yellow equals sunshine. So we really wanted to dial up the use of yellow. You do also get yellow tomatoes, and they do have, they're famous for growing all these exciting different varieties. So we dialed up the colour yellow, and then we created a brand mark that celebrated sunshine. So that's the inspiration for the Isle of Wight tomatoes being written on an art. We convinced them to change their name from the tomato stall to Isle of Wight tomatoes to really celebrate their provenance. We locked up more sunshine, more flavour within the logo, and then we came up with the idea of using the star calyx, it's called, the little green bit on the top of the tomato, as a sort of celebration of their quality. And also the sort of arch of the sun also reflects, you know, the top-down tomato as well. So then when you get onto their packaged produce, so they grow fresh tomatoes, which they sell fresh and to sort of delis and restaurants, but they also then use all of the leftover ones, or the ugly ones, the ones that they can't sell fresh, to create the product. So it's a super great sustainable business where they're not wasting anything and everything goes into something that people can eat and is of exceptional quality. So again, what was nice about creating a distinctive identity for this brand was then you could keep the packaging really simple, which felt really right for, you know, an artisan brand with real simplicity, and just keeping the topography, you know, really plain and simple, and using that calyx. And again, the calyx then appears a lot on red, which helps you get the idea of the tomato. Again, celebrating sunshine throughout the brand. We put this in a presentation, and then they made like one t-shirt for a tomato stall, and then people were like, I want to buy that t-shirt, so now they sell them online. People actually buy them, which is quite mad. Also works on the sort of craft of the crates, and then just having a little bit of that sort of Preston wit and a little bit of fun and introducing ideas to things. So, you know, whether we're using the little calyx on the top of the tamper, again, it looks like a little tomato on there. And then a fun little idea for the sort of loyalty cards from their tomato stall stand in Borough Market, where they could stamp the little calyxes on and make lots of little different coloured tomatoes. And then we had a little suite of assets that talk about all the things that are great about the business. So it's actually a really incredible brand. We're doing lots more work for them at the moment, but they they do amazing things for sustainability and the way that the whole, I could go into the detail, but it's really complicated, but they've got like a closed system and things where they're not wasting anything, they're reusing their energy that they're created with the waste that they can't put into food. And they actually made this van as well. This is a mock-up, but it exists. I need to get some up-to-date photos, but that's driving around the Isle of Wight and getting on the ferry every day. And then we got to do like photo shoots on the island as well, which was really cool, and just bring in that sort of sense of sunlight to everything that we did. So lots of yellow, lots of sort of bright sunny light, and blue skies, and showing all the sort of people behind the brand as well and the experts. And they also did these yellow boxes, which are really cool, instead of plastic punnets, again for sustainability, but also really distinctive to stand out. And then the next one is Signature Brew. So this was all about the mission of the guys at Signature Brew. They're actually based in Walthamstow, where I live, and they wanted to bring great beer to great music. So they were like, why do every gig we go to, all you can get is Red Stripe, like it's shit beer? They wanted to be able to provide great beer because they thought that great music deserved great beer. This is what they looked like when they came to us. Again, very sort of lo-fi design, does look slightly musical. That was why they had the name Signature Brew. We didn't name this brand. But they were lacking any sort of brand presence. That was their logo, which obviously is a signature, so it's quite hard to read from far away. But one of the really exciting things about Signature Brew is that they really embrace collaboration, and I think, again, to create brave brands, you need to be able to work together, work with different people, but you need to be able to empower that brand to go on after you've done the design. And I think that's one thing you learn when you're working commercially, is you can do all these pretty visuals as a fancy design agency, but is it actually going to work in real life? Particularly with some of these smaller brands that we work with, where we don't have control over everything that they do. And one of the exciting things that this brand did was they created multiple beers every year. So you're talking like 15, 20 different beers every year, because they collaborate with different musicians, and the musicians get to make a beer, and then they get to design what that looks like on a can. So we were like, we need to bring some sort of sense of brand to this, but also celebrate the fact that you are collaborating with all these different people. So we came up with the idea of creating almost these like gig posters, which we could use for their core beers, and then these gig posters could be created for all the different collaborations. They also have microphone tap handles, again just bringing that beer and music together through everything that they do. And then obviously the logo itself, oh, it's gone off, is that? There we go. The logo itself being much more bold, feeling like almost like a sort of sticker of a band, and then having beer and music locked up within it. So that's how the core cans look, and then creating a system that could then be used for any band that they collaborate with, any musician that they collaborate with, to basically create whatever that background is. Also the naming of the beers, so all to do with music again, so roadie, studio, backstage, and nightlife. I've got a little video for this one.
Sometimes I feel so lonely. I can't sleep again at night. To do all the things I know we used to do would make me feel so happy. And it's just
It finishes quite quickly, that. But you can see how that then came to life in their brewery as a piece of branding, and then how that comes to life when they collaborate with all these different ones. This was actually shot not that long after we did the identity, but they've gone on to do like hundreds of beers since, and they all look really cool. We were so impressed by like all of the different things that different artists and different musicians have come up with in terms of the background, but it's really cool to create like a really eclectic range and celebrate that collaboration. Cool, so the final one is a coffee brand. So this is what it looked like previously, and Mozzo is actually a really incredible brand from like an ethical point of view. So a lot of coffee brands will say they're fair trade, which is a bit of a sort of controversial thing about what that actually means, but essentially what it means is they pay the coffee producers a fair wage. But Mozzo go way beyond that, and they've created a brand where they're actually building up communities in different areas. So for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, they built a maternity hospital, they set up full cooperative farms, so the people that are growing their coffee, they actually created the businesses for them to then buy off. So they go like way above and beyond being fair trade. They actually have a real passion for the communities that grow the coffee that they use. They also have lots of sort of affiliations with creatives in the UK, artists, and they're quite like a business-to-business brand, so they sell a lot in hotels, Citizen M for example, but weren't like huge outside of that world. And they've gone very corporate with their identity, so they look very much like they're trying to be an Italian corporate coffee brand. They look a lot like, I don't know, an Illy or something. And again, I think they've lost their way a little bit and weren't really communicating what was so great about their brand. Mozzo means hub in Italian, so we thought that was a really great name, but they needed to better communicate their purpose. So again, back to the sort of break it down into two things. It was all about being uplifting, coffee is obviously uplifting, and connecting people together. So we came up with this idea of sort of pulling the Z apart in the name and creating this little hub within the word mark itself that we could then use to create all of these little different things of communication about what the brand was doing. So the hub for coffee, the hub for community, the hub for connection, etc. And then using a colour palette that was really zingy and uplifting and would stand out within the coffee world. Then when it went on to pack, we could use that space within the Zs to do our sort of labelling, and again sort of dialing up more the orange for the coffee packs, because again it's a nice warming colour but still having that surprising mint colour, having bits of copy like feel the buzz of doing good, so just again that sort of double meaning of doing good but also being uplifted by the coffee. And then how we could use that identity. Sometimes we use it without something in it, whether that's to frame photography or on pack, and then sometimes you can sort of use it on repeat to say all the great things about the brand. On coffee cups, again they're just black and white for sustainability point of view, but using the space to talk about purpose. We created a suite of assets that would tell a little bit more of the cooperative story and all the things that they do around the world. And then use those illustrations on pack as well with the kind of little stories. So that was all about making sure that the brand was communicating its purpose and not just sort of looking like everyone else. So in summary of those case studies and creating brave brands, start with a sketch, learn the rules and break them. So don't just follow what everybody else is doing, but do something different. Simplify to create clarity, embrace collaboration, and proudly communicate purpose. And then in terms of you guys, just wanted to give you a few little tips, I guess, on how you guys can take that sort of brave thinking and the challenger mindset forward into what you're doing next. So firstly is belief. Be proud of who you are and what makes you different. I think for me, when I went down to London, it felt like a very brave decision at the time. But also when I was down there, being a woman, being a northerner, I didn't feel like necessarily like I really fitted in. I think that's different now. I think the industry's changed, but I had to sort of really make sure over time that I've become proud of my accent, who I am, what makes me different, and the industry's really looking for that now. I think, 10, 15 years ago, you get taken the piss out of, but now people are like, no, we want people from working class backgrounds, we want difference of perspectives, so I think it's really important. And actually being honest about that when you're interviewing, I think is a positive now, rather than a negative. So just make sure that you know that whatever makes you different is valuable, and that you guys are the future, you guys in this room are the future of the world, obviously, but also of this industry. So you all need to believe in yourself, and that will make being brave easier. Obviously, you need resilience. I think one thing that I've learned in my career, that design is really a process of elimination and not to take things personally. I think the way the process works, and I think this is the same across the whole creative industry, is you have to come up with 100 ideas to get to the one good one. So don't be offended when 99% of the time you're being told it's not right, because that is how it works. That is literally the process. You have to do a lot of shit to get to the good. So that's why you can't take criticism personally, because it is literally part of the process. And that forms resilience, and understanding that and knowing that, not taking it personally, makes you more resilient. Over time. You get used to it. I'm still told all that shit every day. And also just understanding the creative process. 4 Point this morning talked about imposter syndrome, but it's so true. This, I think, is generally how I feel in the creative process. I think how most people, you start it and you're like, you get briefed and you're like, yeah, great brief. And then you go away and you're like, oh my God, I'm so bad at design. I'm never going to be able to think of a good idea. How have I even got to where I've got to? What the fuck? And then you kind of, I just don't want to do it, ignore it, put it away. Then it sort of gets closer to the deadline and you stop panicking about whether you're ever going to come up with anything. Then you do all the work in the last 2 days, and then you hit the deadline and smash it. But I think it's just good to know that no matter where you are in your career, everyone feels like that, and everyone feels like that during the exact process that you go through time and time again. Once you sort of realise that, you're like, oh, okay, this point where I think I'm shit is just part of it. Ambition, obviously, to be brave, you've got to have ambition. And just one thing I wanted to mention here is, I personally think design is an amazing career. It's fun. We get to do like sort of frivolous stuff. It's important, but we get to draw pictures. We get to come up with ideas. We get to be creative every single day. We can actually make a really good career out of it. This is just some examples of one of the more recent salary surveys of money you can earn, because I think that is one thing that I was never told when I was younger. I mean, I remember people saying to me, oh, don't go into design if you want to earn any money, you won't earn any money, you've got to do it for the passion, which I actually think is bullshit, because I think it's a good career. And I've got family who work in the public sector. They earn a lot less money than I do, and they have to work a lot harder to get promotions and work their way up. I think it's bullshit that the creative industry isn't a good career. But yeah, it's competitive, so you need to work hard, but play hard as well, ask questions. But ultimately, I think it's a real privilege to be able to work in this industry and actually make a good career out of it. So if you've got the ambition and you're in and you're passionate about it, you'll do really well. Obviously, having vision is also part of it. I think for me, part of vision is knowing what your passions or priorities and aims are. So everyone used to take the piss out of me in uni, my mates, because they kept saying I did worthy projects. They were like, oh, fucking hell, you can do another worthy project that's preaching about one thing or another. But now I'm working at an agency that we like to work with brands who are doing good. We like to work with brands who are ethical, sustainable. We like to work with brands who are creating healthier, better products. So I feel like I've ended up in the right place for something that I was clearly passionate about, but maybe didn't necessarily realise it at the time. And this can apply to different disciplines as well as different types of brands that you're interested in. So you might be really interested in like techie stuff, you might be really interested in illustration, you might be really interested in really detailed craft. There's a home for all of those. So I think follow what you're passionate in, and then you won't feel like you're doing a day's work in your life, and you'll find the right agency or the right career for you. And then finally, enthusiasm. I mean, I don't think you can make brave decisions without having enthusiasm. I actually see too often, really, placements coming in and not seeming like they want to be there, or you know, interviewing people who seem like, I'm like, why have you even gone into this career? You seem like you really don't want to be here. And then the next person walks through the door and they're like, oh, thanks for interviewing me. I love B&B. Like, I really love the brands you work on. I love the opportunity. And I'm like, well, that's obviously the person I'm going to hire, even if they've got shit portfolio compared to the other person, because they have enthusiasm and they want to do it. So just in terms of making brave decisions for yourself, I think these are the things you need. You need to have belief, you need to build resilience, you need to have ambition, you need to have vision in terms of thinking about what you enjoy, what you like, what you want out of your career and out of your future. And obviously that will mean that you can be enthusiastic about it as well. It's easy to be enthusiastic if it's something that you're passionate about. And then finally, just to leave you on a few little things, ask brave questions. So just a few like little things to consider as you're interviewing, as you leave uni. So agency culture. I think you'd be hard pressed to find a bad agency culture, to be honest, from my experience. The design industry is an amazing place to work, and people actually are really good friends with everyone that they've met through that. But different agencies have different culture. Some are a little bit more laddie, some are a little bit more party, some are a little bit more sensible. You know, some like to work on certain type of work, some others. So I think it's really good just to have that as a consideration and maybe be something that you ask, like how much do they hang out? And I think that's become more and more apparent post-pandemic, when there are some agencies that are fully remote, so they have a very different culture to agencies that are fully in the studio, where you'll be embraced and you'll be out with people and making friends, whereas when you're remote, are you going to get so much of that? So it depends what you want, but it's all about finding your tribe at the end of the day. Another thing to consider is the size of the agency versus the output. This is something that I feel passionate about because it's something that I didn't realise when I was your age. I would look at some agencies out there and be like, wow, I want to work there. They've got these super sick show reels. They work on all these cool brands that I know. But then you see that they put out 2 good projects a year and there's 400 or 500 people that work there. What are those people actually doing day to day? You as a junior designer, what are you actually going to be working on? Because it ain't going to be the stuff that's on their fancy show reel. It's going to be like, I don't know, frozen peas or something. I think one of the things that I'm really proud of at B&B is we're a small agency. We're a design team of probably 7-8 designers. And these are all projects that we put out in the last year. A mix of known brands, brand creation, redesigns. And I think it's all great work. And that sort of goes to show that if you work at an agency where you're actually getting to work on these projects day to day, you're going to have a much stronger portfolio. So it's just for you guys to consider when you're going into an agency, and you know, I imagine you'll be looking at their Instagram, you'll be looking at their website. But when you actually get an interview, ask how many people work there, ask what kind of projects they're working on, ask if there's things that they work on that they don't talk about. And that takes me on to the last one, which is agency ethics. This will mean different things to different people. Some people will be happy to work on certain brands and certain projects, some people won't. B&B, we don't work on cigarettes, we don't work on arms, we don't work on anything oil related. And I think that's really important. And me personally, I would refuse to work on those things. And I'm very fortunate that I work for an agency that's still independent and that can make those decisions. But there are a lot of agencies out there that are working on oil, that are working on arms, that are working on cigarettes because they bring in a lot of money. And I think all of those things are on their website, on their Instagram, and you would never know about it unless you ask, because if you ask, they have to tell you. There's also this website called Clean Creatives. They have an F list of, it's ad agencies, but also design agencies who work on these kind of brands. if that doesn't bother you, that's fine, but I think it's something that you should be aware of and you should be thinking about. I think we all, as designers, have a responsibility to be doing work that's making the world better. And there's been actually a lot of evidence, this website's a really good resource, that doing good creative work for some of these companies actually gives them a lot more profit and a lot more money. So I think it's something to seriously consider as you're going into your career. Obviously, we all want to make money. We all have, lives to get on with, but I think I would have a much clearer conscience not doing that. And then finally, I just wanted to sort of make this point. There's a few creatives at the moment that are putting this out there. I don't know whether you've seen it or not. Jack Branwick, Sean Thomas have created this sort of alliance, the Creative Industry Alliance, to make creativity matter. And this is something that I feel passionate about. The creative industries are being massively underfunded by the government. They're dropping a lot of their funding, and the creative industry is bringing a huge amount of money to our economy. So if you can sign the petition, that'd be great, to make sure that we carry on teaching creativity in school, and that we carry on promoting it. That's me. Thanks.
Excellent. Brilliant.
Thanks. Sorry, I feel like I just talked out.
No, you're okay. Excellent.
Just one over there.
Do you know, so you said you work on quite a lot of projects, it's like you do a lot more than a agency. Is it hard to manage compared to I don't know, you have to juggle because you get so many?
For me personally, yeah, but that's my job, is sort of overseeing the design team. If you were to come in as a placement, as a junior, you get put on, generally juniors are put on one or two. So it's not like every designer in the agency is working on all the projects. It's scheduled so people get specific time on specific jobs. So you don't have to worry about juggling everything that's going on. That's my problem.
Do you take students on placements?
We do, yeah. So we take a few throughout the year, and it often depends on workload and also how many people. So we hired 2 new juniors. We're quite a small team in the summer, so we haven't been taking anyone on since then, because we need to give those 2 juniors time to have our attention and teaching. But yeah, hopefully in the next few months we'll start taking placements on again.
I'm sorry, did you say you're based in London?
We're based in London, yeah.
Thank you. What do you look for in brands? What's the main thing where you'd probably say no to completely?
Oh, that's a good question. So I don't necessarily get to make those decisions because I don't own the company. But I know that Kerry and Sean, the founders, turn away quite a lot of work, and it's not always to do with ethics. It can be to do with budgets, it can be to do with competing brands, or also just not even sort of getting a good feeling from the people that they meet. We work with a lot of founder-led brands, so a lot of brands where their founders still very involved or just starting the brand, and if they don't sort of believe in the product or believe in the founder, then they won't necessarily work on the project for that reason either. Because I think it's really important that they're picking us as partners essentially to help their brand. So I think it's really important to have a really good relationship.
So I noticed a lot of the brands have got illustration work on the
Yes.
website. How do you illustrate it?
So, a mix of things. So, we do quite a lot in-house, mostly because of budget reasons. I would love to use illustrators all the time. The clients don't always want to pay for it, so we end up having to do it ourselves, try and do it ourselves. But a complete mix of things. So, designers might find them on Instagram or agency websites, Pinterest. We usually then have to put forward, if we have a certain style, we usually have to put forward more than one to quote, even though there's usually one that we really want, and we really sort of make the effort to try and convince them that they're the right one, but we usually do have to put more than one quote forward to the client. Any
I don't
more?
know.
How much time do you get to work on a project from brief to completion?
Oh, it depends. Usually we try and kind of keep to our way of working, which doesn't always necessarily fit with budget, but I think it's really important that we make sure we spend the time. So sometimes we might make a loss on the concept stage, but hopefully get it back later on. So concept stage is usually 3 weeks-ish, and we'll usually have 2 designers on it for hopefully most of that time. So it's quite a long time, but we think it's really important. I mean, a lot of these projects, if I'd shown you what the concept looked like and what the end, it was very similar. I think we think it's really important to spend a lot of time at that beginning bit. We give them usually 3 options. But we spend a lot of time on the thinking part of it and making sure that's right, and hopefully the rest of it will be plain sailing. It doesn't always work like that.
Do you speak directly to the clients or do you have account managers?
We have account managers,
Right.
and it depends on your level. So the designers don't generally speak much to the clients up until they get to like maybe senior. I try and bring them into meetings so they can meet them, but without the pressure of presenting. But yeah, I'm very, I see all of the clients really and build relationships with them, but I don't, the client service like manage all the money and the calendars and all that boring stuff.
Do you commission much illustration?
We do sometimes, yeah. I'm trying to, Muffin Nation, which is a fun little job we did last year for a muffin brand. We commissioned an illustrator for that. So yeah, like we do. And tagographers sometimes as well, like, I don't know if you've heard of Rachel Joy.
Yeah.
We've used her on a couple of things. So yeah, it depends. But a lot of it annoyingly comes down to budget, because we would use illustrators a lot more for the client. Sometimes it ends up being an added cost because we've come up with the idea and then we're like, oh, now we want to make it happen and pay for it, and then like it's another cost for the client, which is, sometimes we might invest, it depends.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay. Is it time?
thanks guys.
No, it's time for the other.
Oh, the
The
raffle.
raffle.